Hello again, everybody, and welcome to my 5th review of Season 2 of Game of Thrones. I may have to stop recording halfway through and continue this later, but we shall see. Once again, I'm going to try to do this without looking at my notes, but that never tends to work out either. Anyway, as I said, it's the fifth episode of Season 2. It's called The Ghost of Harrenhal. And just to get it out of the way, in case you're wondering, I consider myself a show watcher. A show watcher, not a book reader. But I have read the first 2 books, and I have read a lot of wiki articles and watched a lot of videos, so I know a lot of the background as well. But I'm not the type of person who goes into a show with all kinds of conceptions about how it should be, because I watched the show before I read the books. I use the books to just fill in extra details, and I love the show, and I will always love the show. So if you're looking for somebody to criticize the show the whole way through, that's not what I usually do. So, because I honestly, if I want to hear something get criticized, it's usually not something I enjoy. And if I enjoy something, I don't want to watch other people criticize it the whole way through. So, as I said, I consider myself a show watcher who then just reads the other materials available for added information. And I will share some of that with you if it is relevant to the scenes in question. And that is how I do my reviews. So, coming from a viewer's standpoint, let's go ahead and get started on this episode. Again, it's called The Ghost of Harrenhal, and this is one of the things I was talking about, how I read afterwards and then get added information. I didn't realize what The Ghost of Harrenhal actually referred to until I read Book 2, because I thought that it was a reference to Jaqen, and it's more of an indirect reference to Jaqen, which we see in the book, which in the show, it's not even mentioned at all, really. But anyway, we're going to just go ahead and start. We'll get to that when we get to the scene in question. But this episode starts with Catelyn and Renly discussing an alliance between Renly and Robb. And it turns out that Renly is quite willing to agree to an alliance with Robb. And he is even willing to give the North their independence, which is what they wanted. And then he'll help Robb destroy his brother's army. And all he asks is that Robb does declare fealty to the throne, but in all other ways the North will be independent. They will just have to fight if the rest of the kingdom's at war, but other than that they will be an independent nation. So it looks like all is going well. The Baratheon and Stark alliance, back in action again, just with a different Baratheon and a different Stark. And of course, you know, if you've already watched the episode, which I hope you have if you're watching the review, I don't know why you'd watch a review of something you haven't seen, but you know that when things go well, they don't generally stay that way, because what happens later in this scene, we get our first death of the episode, and it's an interesting one. They show a shadow, kind of like black fog or smoke or something, but it's a shadow, comes across the floor with a gust of wind, turns into a shadow on the wall in the shape of a man, who may look familiar to some of us, and the shadow, of course, draws a sword and shoves it right through Renly's chest. So, so much for that alliance that they had just agreed to 3 minutes earlier. Somebody had other ideas in mind, and it looked like a shadow demon, perhaps. Maybe one that we saw being born at the end of the last episode. So now you get a little bit more information as to why Melisandre was insinuating to Stannis that having a quote-unquote son with her would assure him of victory, because their son is a shadow demon assassin that murdered Stannis' own brother because it was easier than fighting him. Because Stannis is so darn honorable, he uses shadow demons to kill his own flesh and blood and become a kinslayer, because that's easier than actually fighting somebody with a bigger army, because he's so darned honorable. Can you hear my sarcasm? Can you tell I get really sick of people saying Stannis is honorable? Kinslaying, killing a member of your own family, is one of the biggest sins in the show. And he's using black magic to do it, and he's using it instead of fighting honorably. Yeah, he was outnumbered and he'd probably lose. But he had to do this to win, but the point remains, it was not remotely honorable. At all. Period. And actually in the book, the shadow demon takes out the guy who's holding Storm's End, too. There's 2 different shadow demons that he does this with. Kills the guy that's running Storm's End and Renly. Both. So, he did that twice. But anyway, and the reason they killed the guy at Storm's End was to get one of Robert's bastards, and you know, if you've watched ahead, you know Melisandre has a thing for King's blood. I'll just leave it at that so I don't get into spoilers if you haven't watched ahead, but she really has a thing for King's blood. She likes, it's one of her favorite ingredients in her spells, let's put it that way. But anyway, after the shadow demon kills its Uncle Renly, yeah, that's right, that's what I said, it's Uncle Renly. Of course, the guards think it's Brienne, and they come rushing in, and Brienne, on pure instinct, fights them all off, takes them all out, kills them all, and then she goes back to holding Renly and crying and grieving for him, and Catelyn is trying to get through to her that we're going to get blamed for this, nobody's going to believe what really happened, we have to get out of here, you're not going to be able to get revenge if you get killed. So we have to leave now. So, yeah. And again, it was different in the book, but guess what? Worked fine for me, so I'm not even gonna bother complaining about the way it was in the book. Because I'm not one of those people. And I watched this way before I read the book, so like I said, I read the books for added information to what I've already seen, so I don't read ahead. Anyway, so that's what happens with Renly. Our first big death of the season, I think. There wasn't any main characters that got killed this season before Renly, I don't believe. I could be blanking on it. But it's also in the first, 5 minutes of the episode. And then we go to Littlefinger looking out at Stannis' fleet of ships, and he goes in to confront Loras and Marjorie, and Marjorie is trying to get Loras to leave before Stannis' men get there, because obviously Stannis is not going to be happy with the Tyrells, like I said, they say it both ways on the show. It starts out Tyrell, and then later they say Tyrell. I always say Tyrell, but they say it both ways on the show. It's kind of odd. But anyway, Marjorie's trying to get him to leave. But he's obviously devastated because, you know, him and Renly were a thing. And, he's lost his lover, basically. So, of course, he's devastated. And it flips a little here, too, where Marjorie thinks Brienne did it, and Loras does not believe that at all. Even though he was jealous of Brienne, he does not believe that she would ever kill Renly. And, of course, we know that she didn't. In the book, Loras supposedly believes she did, but it doesn't make a lot of sense that he'd believe that, considering. But anyway, moving on, I don't know. It could work either way, I suppose, how you want to look at it. But Marjorie's trying to get Loras to leave. And Littlefinger asks Loras what he wants, most of all. And Loras, of course, just thinks that Littlefinger's there to sell them to the Lannisters, because he doesn't trust him either. But Loras eventually tells him that what he wants the most is revenge. And Littlefinger has a line here where he says, I've always found that to be the purest of motivations. Oh, yeah. So basically what they do is they convince Loras to leave because Littlefinger basically repeats the same thing to Loras that Catelyn just said to Brienne, that you can't get revenge if you're dead. So, book people might think that that's not necessarily true, but we won't even go into that. I'm not talking about these characters, though. I'm talking about somebody else. Anyway, moving on. So, they convince Loras to leave so he can live to get revenge and won't be taken prisoner and considered traitors by Stannis, because you know the way Stannis is. Oh, you disagreed with me, I shall kill you now. That's Stannis. Honorable Stannis. But, after Loras finally does agree to leave, Littlefinger has this little chat with Marjorie. And in it, he calls Marjorie Your Grace. And, of course, that's the way they address kings and queens on the show. And she says that if Renly wasn't a king, then she wasn't a queen. And Littlefinger asks her, well, do you want to be a queen? And she has that famous line, I don't want to be a queen, I want to be the queen. So yeah, Margaery wants to be the queen. And now that she's told Littlefinger what she wants, he has his next plan of action, figuring out who will be his next ally here. So now he knows what she wants, so now he can use that, basically. So that's what that is. And thankfully that'll be the last time we see Margaery in her taquito dress. It just looks kind of silly. But every other dress she wears is like something that the prostitutes in the brothels would wear. But anyway, when she's wearing it. Then we move back to King's Landing, where they've also heard about Renly's death. And that's another big, great book people have about how fast news travels on the show. Well, if we had to sit around for 15 episodes waiting for them to get the message, the season would have to be a lot longer, I say. But anyway, they've heard about Renly's death and debating about who did it. And Tyrion says, oh, some people say that it was Catelyn that did it. Some people say that it was one of his own Kingsguard. Some people say that it was Stannis himself that did it. And Cersei's like, well, I say well done. And she's starting to drink like a fish, like Robert. This is where we start to see a little bit of that starting to happen. And Tyrion's like, okay, yeah, Renly's dead, but guess what that means here, sister dearest? That means that all of Renly's 100,000 men have now decided to go and side with Stannis, who was the only one she was worried about, if you recall an earlier episode. And so all of them are now going to be on Stannis' side, other than the Tyrells, because, of course, Renly was Loras's lover and Margaery's husband, so they're the only ones that don't side with Stannis. They take off. And this is just a little bit of Tyrion trying to point out to Cersei that they need to discuss what they're going to do, because now Stannis has the numbers. That was the one thing they had in their favor, is that Stannis didn't have a big enough army before to take on King's Landing, and now he does. And Cersei's just telling him, oh, well, Joffrey's taking care of it, and you don't need to know anymore. And of course, Tyrion's like, Joffrey, we're all doomed. Obviously. So she won't give up anything. So then, of course, he goes to his little spy. Oh, my love, Eugene Simon. Dumb like Lancel, but I love Eugene Simon. Oh, and remember, he's now Tyrion's spy after that hilarious scene in the previous episode where he's blackmailing him about sleeping with Cersei. So, Lancel ends up telling Tyrion what the plans really are. And the plans to defeat Stannis are using wildfire. And of course, Tyrion doesn't believe him at first. Picks on him a little more before throwing him out. But wildfire is supposed to be the hottest. We get a little bit more about it later. It's supposed to be like the hottest fire known to man, and it can melt through anything except, I guess, whatever they make the pots out of that holds it. It's the only thing it can't melt through. It was basically what the Targaryens used as an equivalent to dragon fire after the dragons died. So it's the most dangerous, deadly fire ever, and it's green. It burns green. So it's really cool looking, which we'll see later in the season. But anyway, not a spoiler, just saying, let's see wildfire later in the season. So that is Cersei and Joffrey's plan. They're going to use wildfire against Stannis. And as I said, Tyrion doesn't at first believe Lancel, but eventually Lancel's like, I swear on my life, and Tyrion's like, I don't care about your life. He's like, I swear on the 7. And Tyrion's like, oh, even torturing you is boring. And he throws him out of the little carriage or whatever they're in. And after he gets thrown out, he tells Lancel, this is another fun line, he's like, please tell my friend Bronn to kill you if anything should happen to me. And Lancel repeats it, and Bronn just smiles. He's like, it will be my pleasure. Oh, so they're big fans of Lancel too. Like I said, I don't like the character Lancel, but he does give us some really funny moments, and I do like the actor. But anyway, so that's how Tyrion discovers Joffrey and Cersei's big plan about how to defend the city. So, let's see. After the whole Bronn and his little comedic, "it will be my pleasure to kill you, Lancel." He didn't say all that, but you get the idea. After that, our next scene is going to be the one they were talking about earlier, Stannis. The proud father, Stannis. Well, you saw what his shadow demon did. Killed his brother for him, because he's so honorable. But anyway, we go to Stannis and Davos is doing the right thing and saying, "I give you my condolences," and Stannis doesn't care, obviously, he's whatever. Yeah, he's really moved. And Davos says that people grieve for Renly, and Stannis' response is, "Oh, people love a fool." Yeah, he's really broken up about his brother getting killed, huh? So, then they go into the tent and they get into a little bit of talk about, well, first Davos tries to get him to talk about Melisandre having the shadow baby, and Stannis won't discuss it at all. He just shuts him right down, does not want to speak about it at all. And this is also where we hear that the Tyrells, however you feel like pronouncing it from one week to the next, that they are the only ones that didn't come to Stannis' side, and Stannis is saying the rest of them should just be lucky that I didn't hang them all as traitors. So they bring it around to talking about their plans, and Davos asking Stannis about when they're going to King's Landing, and he asks Stannis if he will bring the Red Woman with him, Lady Melisandre. I think it's the first time Davos actually calls her by her name. And Davos tells him that if she comes, then the victory will be hers, not Stannis's, because people already believe that she's whispering orders in Stannis' ear and he's just obeying. Which is kind of true. Kind of. So, and Davos says, "We just won those banners from Renly. Don't lose them to her." So he's basically saying that none of your men trust her. They think that you're wrapped around her little finger and doing whatever she tells you, and you have to make a stand here and not include her in this plan, because then your men will not follow you. That's how big of a problem his banners have with Melisandre. None of them want anything to do with her or the way she's doing things, and they don't even know about the shadow baby. Well, Davos kind of does. He doesn't know what the shadow baby did, but he knows of its existence. And I really wish there was something else we could call it, but it's a shadow demon baby. I don't know what else to call it. So anyway, that's just Davos pointing out to Stannis that his men are not going to follow him if he continues to appear like he's just doing Melisandre's bidding, which he kind of sort of is. I got that impression real quick. Next, he believes so that she can help him win, but still, whatever. Then we go to Tyrion and Bronn walking through the city and having a chat. And Tyrion is telling Bronn about his worries about Stannis, and he's saying we're completely outmatched, and Bronn's like, "Well, there's that mind you keep going on about." And Tyrion's like, "I've never been able to kill people with it." And Bronn says, "Well, I guess that's a good thing, because I'd be out of a job." And then, more comedy from Bronn and Tyrion. And then we get to this protester, who's giving this big speech about how brother fornicates with sister in the bed of kings, and the fruit of their incest is rotten, and he's dancing down his blood-stained halls to the tune of a twisted demon monkey. And Tyrion's like, "Well, I can't argue with his assessment." And Bronn's like, "You do know that demon monkey he's talking about is you, because that's what the common people have their opinion of Tyrion, that he's the one that's controlling Joffrey and having Joffrey do all these horrible things." And Tyrion says, "I'm the one that's trying to save them." And Bronn says, "I know, but you don't have to convince me, but that's what they think." So you get a little clue about how Tyrion has been pretty right all these times he's saying about the common people are turning against the crown. And this is just where he discovers that they consider him part of the problem too, when he's the only one that's trying to, save them, as he says. So we get a little sneak peek into what the common people think. Oh, and we also got a brief mention of what happened to your birthday present, the girls that he sent to Joffrey, but it still is never completely clear whether Daisy got killed or not. So that's still left open-ended. Oh, and then we go to Theon. Oh, Theon. You can tell he's another one of my favorite characters. So he's getting ready to take his ship out to raid the fishing villages like his daddy told him to, because now he's like, no, I don't like the Starks, I like the Greyjoys, even though the Greyjoys treat me like crap and the Starks raised me. So I'm all Greyjoy now. So he's all happy about getting this boat, and he's trying to claim his crew and set out on his raiding of the fishing villages, and it turns out that the Iron Islanders don't really have any respect whatsoever for Theon either. And even his own crew are just mocking him and saying, oh, you're going to be in charge? I've been doing this longer than you. Why should I listen to you? So the mutiny's starting before they even get on the boat, basically. So it's all going really well for Theon. His family hates him, his people hate him, but those are the ones he chose over the Starks. Brilliant he is. Oh yes, oh yes. Anyway, so this is also where we see that they're not going to listen to him at all. And then after this little confrontation he has with this guy who they never say the name of, it's probably in the book, but he's such a minor character I didn't really pay attention to it. And then after this we meet Dagmar Cleftjaw, who, yes, is very different in the book, but I don't care. I'm not even going to comment on that. His face is basically cut in half. I guess they didn't really want to do that with the makeup. That's his name, Dagmar Cleftjaw. It's a reference to his face being split in half by an axe. Anyway, alright, so we meet Dagmar Cleftjaw. And Dagmar is kind of being rolled into another character. They're kind of giving that character's lines to Dagmar, which we won't really see much of until Winterfell, but keep it in mind that there's another character once we go back to Winterfell that is supposed to be there but isn't there, and Dagmar gets some of his lines. But I don't know if you consider that a spoiler, me telling you that they're going to be going back to Winterfell, but you kind of get that here in this very scene. Is Dagmar explains to him that they're never gonna listen to you until you prove yourself, until you prove you're enough of a badass for them to respect you. You've got to earn their respect by being a jerk. That's just the way the Iron Islanders are. The bigger the jerk you are, the more they like you. That should be their family words, I think. If you're an asshole, we love you. Yay, Iron Islands. So, just my take on it. Just my take on it. So Dagmar tells him that he's got to earn their respect by doing something that they consider worthy and warrior-like and conqueror-like, and raiding fishing villages isn't going to do it. And Theon's, well, that's what my father told me to do. And Dagmar says, you think they do what they're told or do what they want? And he points out that fishing villages aren't going to mean anything to these people. You raiding fishing villages isn't going to get you anything. And that's where they bring up the idea of taking over Torrhen Square, which is, I guess, one of the nearest towns to Winterfell. And Theon, I always mess up their names, and I don't know why. It's just they sound too much alike. I know exactly who one is and who the other one is, but it comes out wrong. Theon is saying that, yeah, we could take Torrens, but we couldn't really hold it that long, because he lived in the north. He knows how they work. And he points out, no, but they'll send the people from Winterfell to defend it, which leaves Winterfell where? Undefended. So you get our little hint at what he's planning on doing. Grabbing one town to distract Winterfell and send Winterfell's security away. Go Theon. Alright, then we go back to Harrenhal, where Tywin is not too thrilled with the way the war is going. Robb keeps kicking his butt. Tywin's men are getting all whiny, complaining. They don't want to be there. And Tywin says that they've been waiting for Robb to fall, and he's not going to. And then one of the Lannister cousins is complaining and saying, "Oh, well, we don't sleep or anything. That's why we're not able to figure out how to defeat Robb." And Tywin's like, "Fine, go back to your wife. Get out of here." He's like, "If you weren't Lannister, I'd kill you." So Tywin doesn't have time for you being tired. Yeah. And he asks Arya, who's now his cupbearer, to get them water, not wine, because they're going to be there for a while. And he asks Arya, he wants some insight, so to speak. He asks her where she's from. And she makes up a story and then gets the sigils wrong. And he says, "You're a northerner, aren't you? Why else would you lie about where you're from? You're a northerner." And he's kind of smart. Now, people keep saying, "Why doesn't he recognize Arya?" Dude, Arya's like 11. When would Tywin ever have met her? Really. He wasn't in King's Landing for the few weeks she was there. There's no way he'd know who Arya is. It's not like he could look her up on Facebook. But anyway. So, he's asking her what the Northerners think of Robb. He wants the opinions of the people. Some inside information on Robb, so to speak. If only he knew how much inside information she had on Robb, considering it's her brother. But he just wants a Northerner's perspective on Robb. And she says that they call him the young wolf, and that he rides a dire wolf into battle, and that he can even turn into a wolf, and that he can't be killed. That's what the Northerners say about Robb. And he asks, "Do you believe that?" She says, "No, anyone can be killed." And she gives Tywin this look. And he's just like, "What are you looking at me like that for?" So it's kind of a cute little scene. Then Arya goes to get them water and finds that Jaqen is now fighting for the Lannisters, and she's not thrilled. And she thinks that Jaqen didn't see her, but of course he did, and he comes back to talk to her. And he says, "A girl keeps her mouth shut, but friends may talk, and a boy becomes a girl." And she says, "I was always a girl." And he's saying in his own cute little way of speaking, "So why didn't you talk to me?" And she says, "Well, you're fighting for the Lannisters now. I should have let you burn. You're evil because you're working for the Lannisters." He says, "Well, you're serving water to the Lannisters. Why is that okay for you? But not for me." He's just doing what he can do, because remember, Tywin wanted them to use their skills, and that would be Jaqen's skill, fighting, I guess. And she says that she didn't have a choice. And Jaqen said, "There's always a choice. I had a choice, you had a choice." But to make her feel a little better about his quote-unquote betrayal, even though really it's just not so much a betrayal, it's just, I'm here, just do what I'm gonna do, so I'm not a prisoner. And he tells her this interesting thing. He says that a man owes her a debt. He pays his debts, and he owes her a debt. He owes her 3. And she's like, 3 what? And he says that 3 lives she's taken from the Red God, and 3 must be repaid. Because he repeats what Mary Maz-Dur said, "Only death can pay for life." He's basically saying that you saved me and my 2 friends, so I will kill 3 people for you. Just name them and I will. Interesting. She's like, "Seriously, I can name any 3 people and you'll just go kill them." And he says, "A man has said." So this is where she finds out that he's willing to kill any 3 people for her to repay her for saving him. So that's an interesting little development. This is why people like Jaqen H'ghar. He's kind of fun. So he's telling Arya that, he's going to be her pet assassin for at least 3 names. And he'll kill them for her. Anybody she mentions, he'll do away with them just to thank her for saving him. And the 2 guys that he's not even friends with, but she did save them too. So this is where we get a little more information on the type of character Jaqen is and why he's fun. And she tells him, she doesn't believe him, but just to test it, she's like, "Okay, fine, go kill that guy who tortures everybody, the tickler." And Jaqen says, "Okay," and leaves. yes, that was that. And then we go way beyond the wall, where the Rangers of the Night's Watch are waiting to meet Harrenhal, who is this legendary ranger who has been out beyond the wall for an entire winter, and is going to be helping them deal with the wildling threat, because all the wildlings are, organizing together now. And Sam and John well, before we get to Sam, John does point out, so it is possible to survive out here. And Mormont says it's possible for Halfhand. And that's he had his part of his hand cut off, obviously, that's why they call him that. But anyway, and Sam's going on and on about, oh, Gilly would love this. And Dolores said, Mr. Sarcasm is like, nothing more disgusting than a man in love. And that's not CGI. A lot of people think that's CGI. It's not CGI. They actually film in Iceland. It really does look like that. They're a little cold, though. Anyway, and they can only film for like 4 hours a day, and then it's dark. But anyway, Sam's going on and on about they're at the Fist of the First Men. He's talking about how old this place is, and he says, before the Targaryens defeated the Andals, before the Andals defeated the First Men. And Dolores said, it's like, before I die, stop talking. And he's talking about how thousands of years ago the First Men stood here all through the long night, and asks, what do you think that they were like? And Dolores says, stupid, smart people don't end up in a place like this. And John says, I think they were scared. I think they were trying to get away from something, and I don't think it worked. I mentioned in my prophecy video, all the Starks have prophetic dreams, and they've cut that completely from the show, other than Bran and Rickon. Yes, Jon and Arya and Sansa all have prophetic dreams as well. Sansa's are incorrect because she lost her wolf, is the assumption why hers are incorrect, but they all have prophetic dreams. So, if that's why you think Jon knows more than... I mean, I'm not saying it's directly related to a dream, because, he's probably heard all the stories and has put it together, and he's seen the White Walker and everything. But, yeah, that's one little gripe I have about the show. That's why I did a video about it, that they cut out all the prophecies and dreams and visions, except for a couple from Bran and a couple from Melisandre, and a couple from another character we meet in Season 3. But anyway, so they're talking about they're waiting for Corrin to come back and the horn blasts, and again we hear 1 blast for friends, 2 blasts for foes, and then we hear that 3 blasts means White Walkers. And it hasn't been blown 3 times for thousands of years, because that's how long it's been since we've seen the White Walkers. And I think it's Dolores Ed or Gren. I think it's Dolores Ed says, well, if it hasn't been blown for thousands of years, then how do you know they blew it for White Walkers? And of course, then they all say, you read it in a book. So yeah, get a little bit more about them there, and what the 3 blasts means. Foreshadowing, maybe? Okay, and then we move on to Tyrion following up on Lancel's information about the wildfire. And it turns out, like, Lancel had told him that the Alchemist Guild was working on it, and he had overheard Cersei talking to the Pyromancer. So then Tyrion and Bronn go to check on this, and turns out it is true. They do have a huge, huge, huge stash of wildfire in these vaults, or whatever they're called at this point. I don't think they say directly. Anyway, and that guy that's playing Pyromancer, Helene, that is Roy Dotrice, the one who does all of the voices for all the audiobooks. He reads all the audiobooks. Just a little bit of trivia. Anyway, so they're talking about wildfire, and he says that there's 7,000 some pots of it, and again, it's mentioned that the Targaryens used that as their source of power once they lost their dragons, and Bronn is skeptical, doesn't think it's real, and it's just pig shit, and the Pyromancer says, our order does not deal in pig shit. And he says, he's talking about how powerful wildfire is, and he uses the phrase, it's fire given form, if that sounds familiar to you, because there's going to be a very similar phrase later in this episode. Tyrion asks how exactly they're supposed to be using this wildfire, and he says that they were going to use catapults, and Bronn has issues with that too. He says that men get scared, men run, and they end up dropping pots of wildfire and burning down the entire city that they're trying to protect. So wildfire is not a controllable weapon, at least not easily controllable, and that's why it's so dangerous, and they should not use it. So Bronn is very opposed to this plan. First, he doesn't believe that it's actual wildfire, and then once he's convinced that it's wildfire, he thinks that it's the stupidest idea in the world, because it could lead to them burning down their own city if they have one wrong move, because it burns through everything. And it's uncontrollable pretty much. And he has this line about men win wars, not magic tricks. Stannis might not agree with that. Or Renly definitely doesn't agree with that anymore, I guess. Oh wait, he's dead. But I liked Renly too. You know, I said before that if Renly had been around, and if Dany wasn't an option, Renly probably would have been my first choice for leader. First I picked Dany, and then Renly. Of the contenders, anyway. I mean, there's some people that aren't even trying for the throne that I think might be pretty good at running things, but anyway. And basically this ends with Tyrion telling the pyromancer, Hallene, Hallyne, that he's no longer going to be making wildfire for Cersei. He's going to be making it for Tyrion instead. And then, I'm going to have trouble with this scene, because I'm just going to be sitting here looking at the screen caps and going, oh my god, he's so cute, I want him. Oh, I love Drogon, I love him, he's so cute. I love all the dragons, they're adorable. Yes, I had pet lizards. They were never quite as cool as the dragons, but close. Anyway, this is Dany teaching Drogon how to eat. And remember, they couldn't figure out what kind of meat he ate? Well, here's our answer. He eats cooked meat. That's why he wouldn't eat before. He doesn't like raw meat. He likes cooked meat. So, this is where you get the cute, adorable little picture of him spitting fire at the meat and learning how to feed himself at last. Too adorable, too adorable. I love the dragons. They're just so cute. Even when they get bigger, they're still cute. I love them. But anyway, the dragons are my favorite characters. Yeah, I think they are. Anyway, so this is Dany teaching Drogon how to eat, and aw, so cute. Alright, and then after Drogon gets put to bed, after he has his dinner, then we see a little bit of tension here developing between Doria and Irri. I don't know. And during this whole scene, Doria is speaking in the common tongue, and Irri's speaking in Dothraki. And Irri's a little jealous about how Dany and Doria are bonding over the dragons, I guess. I don't know. And Doria says that Xaro made Dany a dress and she should wear that. And she points out that Xaro Zoan Doxus, who nobody can pronounce his name, I guess they watched the show in mute, I don't know. Anyway, she says that Xaro is the wealthiest man in Karth, and he made her this dress and she should wear it. And Dany says, last time a wealthy man gave me a dress, he was selling me to kill Drogo. So, a little callback to season 1, and how Dany, even though she fell in love with Drogo, she's still a little hurt by how she had been treated in her earlier life. But anyway, and this is where Dany tells Doria that Xaro may be their host, but they barely know anything about him and they should find out more. And then she looks at Doria and says, men talk when they're happy, right? Because of that whole sex lesson we got with Doria and Dany in season 1. Because Doria used to be a prostitute, and she was saying that all these stories she heard were from the men that she was with, because men talk when they're happy. So, lots of callbacks to season 1. Lots and lots of callbacks. So basically, Dany sends Doria to make Xaro happy, in order to find out more about him. So, that's how that turns out, and, again, Eerie and Doria seem to be having a bit of a tension developing between them. Kind of like they're fighting over Danny almost, but, not outright, but kind of. And, then we see the Carthene market. And in this part, the Dothraki are planning on the best way to steal things. And Danny is not thrilled with this. She goes over to them like an upset parent of a 3-year-old or something. Says, no, we're not stealing anything. They're our hosts. We're not going to steal their stuff. Stop it. No stealing. and Jorah says that Viserys always said that the only thing Dothraki knew how to do was steal things from the better man. Or Danny says that Viserys said that. And Jorah said, well, they also are quite good at killing the better man. And then we get the line where Danny says, that's not the kind of queen I'm going to be. Again, a little insight into why I'm Team Targaryen. Like I said, Danny may slip and fall along the way, but she seems like she would be a good leader once she works out how to be a good leader. Because that's what she actually wants to do, is be a leader, but she doesn't want to be a bad leader. She wants to do a good job. But anyway, then we get our introduction to Pyat Pree. And he is, I guess, the representative of the 13 that is one of the warlocks of Qarth. And he's a little funky looking. And, he does this little magic trick where he has Danny look at this rock and talks about how when you look into it you can see many facets of yourself. And then when she looks up, there's a copy of Pyat Pree standing several feet away while she's still holding the other one's gem in her hand. And so yeah, he can make copies of himself. A little bit weird. And so he's saying, oh, we would be honored to have you as a guest at the House of the Undying. They want her to come to the House of the Undying and speak with them. And using his magic tricks as a lure to get her interested in coming there. And then Zaro interrupts, and he apologizes and says that, oh, the warlocks just go to the House of the Undying. She asks about the House of the Undying. He says that's where they go to squint at dusty books and drink shade of the evening that turns their lips blue and their minds so soft that they believe that their parlor tricks are real magic. Now, even though they changed the House of the Undying a lot in the show, keep in mind a previous scene in a previous episode where it was hinted at that once the dragons return to the world, a lot of other magical things return to the world. Just keep that in mind. So, everybody's a disbeliever in magic at this point, but now that the dragons are back, they're getting proven wrong a lot more frequently than they used to. Like I said, the dragons and magic are connected. Anyway, so that's our little introduction to Pyat Pree and the Warlocks. And we also meet another character in this scene. Her name is Kaith. She is a Shadowbinder from Ashai, which is kind of sort of what Melisandre is as well. But Melisandre's a Red Priestess. They're both Shadowbinders, I believe. I could be wrong, but I believe they're both Shadowbinders from Ashai, and Melisandre just became a Red Priestess as well. But she has visions and things too, and she actually gives Danny a couple of prophecies in the book. But like I said, they cut out almost all the prophecies and visions and things like that, which is why I made a separate video about them, because that's my one complaint about the show, that they've cut out so much of the prophecies and dreams and visions. But Kaith is sitting here and giving Jorah somewhat of a warning and saying that she knows him, and she's no one, but Dany's the mother of dragons, and they'll come day and night to see the wonder born into the world again, and they'll lust after her power, because dragons are fire made flesh. So, a little bit of a play on what was said earlier about fire given form, and she says that fire made flesh is what dragons are, and then fire is power, is how she ends it. So she's being kind of prophetic, saying what's going to happen, but she gives actual prophecies to Dany in the book. Actual prophecies. But anyway, then we go to the aftermath of Catelyn and Brienne escaping from Renly's camp after the shadow demon assassin thing killed him. And Brienne is saying it looked like Stannis. The shadow looked like Stannis. And Catelyn's still in somewhat denial. And she's like, it just looked like it was in shape of a man, right? And that's when Brienne says a shadow in the shape of Stannis. And we get around to Cat telling her that she's only going to go to Robb's camp long enough to tell him what happened, and then she's going to go back to Winterfell because she's been away from Bran and Rickon for too long. And they talk about how Brienne never knew her mother, and she says that Catelyn's got a kind of strength, and she doesn't know Robb, but she could follow Catelyn because of Catelyn's strength, and she says it's a woman's strength, and something along those lines. But this is basically, it all comes around to Brienne. She doesn't want to serve Robb because she doesn't know Robb, but she agrees to serve Catelyn as long as Catelyn lets her kill Stannis. So Catelyn says, well, you know, he's surrounded by his Kingsguard, and Brienne says, I'm just as good as any of them, which we saw her kill a bunch of Renly's Kingsguards when they attacked her. And she tells Brienne that she doesn't serve anything or anyone by following Renly to the grave. And, of course, that's when Brienne says that she wants to serve Catelyn as long as Catelyn doesn't hold her back when it comes time to get revenge on Stannis. And she pledges her life and her sword to Catelyn. And Catelyn says that, you know, you'll always have a place in my home, and I won't ask anything of you that would bring dishonor. Now, if that could be kind of a foreshadowy thing, except I think what it's foreshadowing is something that's been completely cut from the show, but we won't know till season 5. So, not quite sure why they included it if they were cutting that from the show. I don't know. I'm still not quite sold on them cutting that from the show because it is just ridiculous. But anyway, this is just where they, Brienne pledges herself to Catelyn, and they both swear by the old gods and the new. And so, that's how Brienne comes to be working for Catelyn now. So, and like I said, that there's things that are supposedly going to happen later with Catelyn and Brienne that might call back to that, but then people are claiming that that's not actually going to be on the show anyway, so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Like I said, I'm not completely convinced that's not going to be on the show, because if it isn't on the show, it's a really big mistake. But anyway, so that's just that Catelyn and Brienne scene, and then we go back to Winterfell, where Bran is holding court again and hearing the complaints of his people. Rickon's just smashing walnuts. He's very interested. He's 6. What do you expect? Bran's 10. He shouldn't be holding court anyway, but they all left, which is what I said in the first review about all the little direwolf puppies being left on their own. That was symbolizing some things. Here we go. Seeing it now, huh? Anyway, so this guy says he can't tend his flock because his 2 or 3 sons or whatever always helped him, and now they're off at war, and he does say he completely supports the war, but that he can't do this all alone. And that's when Bran offers to give him 2 little orphan boys to help, and he says, oh, well, my wife always wanted more kids anyway. So he gives him these kids just for him to give them shelter and food. And then Roderick comes in, because apparently after Roderick and Catelyn left Winterfell and Catelyn went to Rogue's camp, Roderick must have come back to Winterfell, because he comes in to tell Bran that Torrhen's Square is under attack, and that it's barely 40 leagues from Winterfell, and their first assumption is that it's the Lannisters, but they can't strike that far north. Maybe it's a raiding party led by the Mountain, you know, that fun guy, or possibly Sellsword, hired by the Lannisters. They're basically trying to figure out who's attacking Torrhen's Square. Maybe they need to go back and watch the Theon scene. Right. But anyway, then Bran agrees to send 200 men to help protect Torrhen's Square, and Luwin thinks it's too many, but Bran says that if we can't protect them, why should they protect us? And Roderick says, oh, well, it won't take us very long. Southerners don't do well up here. It's not Southerners. I guess he didn't watch the Theon scene. But anyway, so that leads into what happens to Winterfell's men, why they're not at Winterfell anymore. And then he's talking to Osha about the three-eyed raven again, and he asks Luwin, but Luwin claims he's never heard of it. And Osha says, oh, well, it must mean nothing then. And Bran calls her a liar, and she gets offended. And he says, well, you didn't give me an honest answer, so it's not far off. And he says that he's been having dreams about the raven, and then she reminds him, oh, you said you didn't dream. Who's the liar now? So, and he basically eventually tells her this dream that was originally Jojen's in the book, but you still get the point. Because we don't meet Jojen until later in the show. But, he says that he dreamed that the sea came to Winterfell, and that there were drowned men floating in the courtyard, and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And that, and she reminds him that the sea's hundreds of miles away, but she still looks pretty darn worried by this vision. So you can tell, once again, Osha does kind of believe, even if she won't admit to it. She does kind of believe in these visions and stuff that Bran's been having. So she does look pretty worried. And Bran's like, yeah, I'm sure it's just a stupid dream, right? And he asks her what they say about the raven, the three-eyed raven north of the wall. And her only response is they say all sorts of crazy stuff north of the wall. So again, you kind of get the idea that Bran's dreams mean something, and that dream's going to mean something. And that Osha does believe in it, even if she won't readily admit to it. I guess maybe because she doesn't want Bran to be any more scared, or maybe she just doesn't want his dreams to be true, even though she kind of has a hunch that they are, because, again, she's lived north of the wall. She's seen all this stuff and knows about all this stuff. So, like I said in a previous review, Osha is kind of almost representing the audience here. Like, she knows what's really going on, but she doesn't want it to be true, which is kind of what Benjen said in a previous episode, that he doesn't want the disturbing reports to be true. But you get the idea just from her reactions and her half answers and stuff that she does completely believe that Bran is having visions that mean something. Since, of course, Bran's one of the only ones we get visions from, even though there's hundreds of visions and dreams prophecy in the book. But anyway, then we go back to north of the wall. And, Corin is there with them, and him and Jon see the wildlings fire, so they know they're being watched. And they ask Corin here, don't know if I mentioned it in the last scene or not, I had to do this in 2 parts, but, they ask Corin how many wildlings have joined Mance, and he says, all of them. Yeah, all of them. That's a lot of wildlings, because there's many different tribes and stuff. But, he says that they're gathered like deer against the wolves, and that they're almost ready to move. Okay, not getting into spoiler territory, but he's being a little liberal with the word almost. It takes a while before the wildlings actually do anything. Let's just put that on. So anyway, and he reminds them that Mance used to be a Night's Watchman, and that they won't run, the wildlings won't run, because they're more organized now, and they're more like the Night's Watch. And Corin says that now they have the Night's Watch has to be more like the wildlings, and his suggestion is to sneak in and kill Mance with a small group, and to get rid of the lookouts. And Jon wants to go, of course. He calls him Lord Corin, and of Corin said, oh, that might be the first time I've been called Lord Corin. So John's still kind of brainwashed into doing things the way the Southerners, quote-unquote Southerners, do it. But this is where they come around to telling Corin that John's the one that killed the White, and Corin seems impressed by that. And then Mormont reminds him that he got his butt kicked by Craster, and Corin says, well, in his defense, that's a tough old goat. But basically, Sam knows that, seeing that John wants to go, he volunteers to cover for John's stored duties if he goes with Corin. And Mormont eventually gives in here, because he does kind of trust John more than he lets on, and he says that he hopes John makes a better ranger than a steward. So that's how it turns out that John ends up going with Corin to take care of the wildling lookouts and eventually, give them an opportunity to sneak in and kill Mance, the king beyond the wall, who's organized all these wildlings. And that's how that goes. And let's see, after this, they really like going from like the ice cold to like the hot desert, because after this we go back to Dany. And Zoan Daxus, again, if you don't watch the show in mute, you should be able to pronounce his name. Zaro is talking to Dany and asks her how long her manservant, Jorah, has been in love with her. Dany denies it and says he's not her manservant, he's her advisor and her friend. But he says that he can always tell what a man wants, but with women it's more complicated. And he asks Dany why she wants to take back the Iron Throne. She says because she promised to protect her people and it's hers by right. And he says, oh, so you're a conqueror. And she tells her about how he came to Karth with nothing and now he's the wealthiest man there. And Dany says, well, let's see, you're a conqueror too, you're just less ambitious. That's a fun one. She wants to know what Zaro wants. Why did he vouch for her at the walls? What does he really want from her? And he offers here to give Dany half of his wealth if she marries him. And she said, oh, that was a romantic proposal. And he says that his parents came from nothing, but if he marries Dany, then his children will be princes and princesses. And he says, see, I have more ambition than you thought. And this is also where she finds out that Robert is dead. So that's how she gets that news. Yes, it happened different in the book, but like I said, I don't really care about them changing the Karth storyline except for the very last part. So here, we get that Zaro wants Dany to marry him. But it's not, they don't mention this on the show, but in Karth they have a tradition where when you marry somebody, you're allowed to ask them for one thing, and they are not allowed to tell you no. And he wants to marry Dany. Keep it in mind. Now you know why he wants to marry Dany. Yeah. So, after her scene with Zaro, she has a scene with Jorah, who is now back from wherever he was off to, and she says that, 4 kings are fighting each other, and that now is the time that they can move in, because all the armies are distracted, so now would be a good time to move on Westeros, is what she's trying to tell Jorah. And Jorah is saying, well, you're basing this on what Zaro told you. We don't even know if he's trustworthy. And he says that, rich men don't get rich by giving more than they get. So you get an idea that maybe Jorah knows a little bit about this wedding tradition that, is probably behind what Zaro wants from Dany. Jorah is, he's mainly just telling her that moving carefully is the hard way, but it's the right way. But you can kind of tell just by Dany not agreeing with him that readily and wanting to do the opposite. The seeds of doubt have been planted by Zaro saying, Jorah's actually in love with you. So he's planted some doubt here, which is why she's not readily listening to Jorah as she usually does. And she finally just turns and asks Jorah, what do you want? Huh? What do you want? Because he's claiming that Zara must want something else, so she's asking him, what does he want? And he says, to see her on the throne. And she asks him why he wants to see her on the throne. And here's where he says that she has a gentle heart that she may try to hide. But if she were the queen, she would not only be respected and feared, but she would also be loved. And he says that someone like that can and should rule, and centuries can come and go without a person like that ever being on the throne. Which is a little nod to Targaryen history, because half the Targaryens were nuts. They did not make very good rulers, but half of them actually were good rulers. So, the one saying that they say often in the show is, every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin, whether they're going to be a good person or a crazy person. So, he's basically saying she's one of the good ones, and that's why she should rule. Because of the type of person she is. And, let's see. He also says that he sometimes can't believe that Dany's real. And you see this look on her face where she's kind of starting to realize that, oh, he does love me. Oh. So she's starting to realize it. But, yeah. And finally, when she realizes this and thinks about what he says, she asks, what does Jorah want her to do, honestly? So she finally just gives in and asks, okay, what do you think I should do? And he says that she should make her own way, and that she only needs one ship, and that the allies she needs are in Westeros, not Karth, and that he'll go and find the ship for her. So it basically comes around that at first Dany's kind of doubtful and wants to go along with Xaro, but Jorah does turn her around on it and makes her see that she needs to be more careful and she needs to plan things a little more practically than just marrying some guy and hoping that that will help her. Because, well, saw how her last marriage turned out. It was good for a little while, but it really didn't end well. Didn't start well either, but still, she can't depend on somebody else. She needs to have the strength herself to do what she needs to do. And then we get to the last scene. Joe Dempsey fans love this scene. I don't have a problem with Joe Dempsey, but yeah, whatever. Anyway, he's practicing with the sword he just made, and Arya's telling him, Arya the Orphan Boy. Arya's telling him that, he should stand side-face when he practices because he's a smaller target. And he's like, am I fighting somebody? What? He just looks around. She's like, no, you're practicing for fights. You should practice right. So, like I said in the earlier review, she is kind of taking everything Syrio ever told her to heart. So, she's basically passing on her wise knowledge of sword fighting that she had from her 4 or 5 lessons with Syrio to Gendry. And then they hear a scream and they go running. And it turns out that the Tickler, the one who tortures everyone, the one she told Jaqen to kill, as her first of her 3 names, he'd be dead. He'd be dead. Right after Jaqen said that he'd kill 3 people for her and all she has to do is name them. And she named this guy and now he's dead. Interesting how that worked out. Wonder if now she believes Jaqen. So, that's another name people get wrong all the time. Jaqen Hagar. Jaqen Hagar. That's all. If you don't watch the show on mute, you should know how to pronounce the name. But anyway, and she looks up and she sees Jaqen and realizes, oh, wow, this really did work. I really do have my own pet assassin. Ha ha ha. So, and I said at the beginning that I wasn't positive on the name of this episode, The Ghost of Harrenhal, and I thought it had maybe something to do with Jaqen, because, he's unseen and stuff like that. I didn't realize it until I read the second book, what that was a reference to. The whole time she was at Harrenhal, she kept hearing all these stories about it being haunted, and how the ghosts are the ones that murdered all the people that died in Harrenhal because it's haunted and everybody who lives there perishes. But what her inner monologue at the end of this chapter in the book says, well, if Harrenhal is haunted, the ghosts always left me alone. And then after this happens, she says, Harrenhal is haunted. I was at Arya, then it was Aerie, then I was Weasel, then I was Nan, all the names she went through in the book. And she says, now I'm just the ghost of Harrenhal, because she's the one that's behind the killing of the people in Harrenhal, fulfilling the curse in her own little way. So the ghost of Harrenhal refers to the fact that Arya is now the one indirectly responsible for the people in Harrenhal coming to a bloody end. So she's the ghost of Harrenhal. And that's what the name means. Like I said, I thought it had something to do with Jaqen before I read the book, because, you know, he moves silent and stealthy and is unseen. So it kind of does have to do with Jaqen, since he's the one that's doing the killing, but he's doing it at the behest of sweet little Arya. But I think she's got more than 2 more names on her list, so might need to find a new pet assassin, or possibly become one herself. So, well, she already did kill that one guy accidentally, so we'll see. Anyway, that is the end of episode 205, The Ghost of Harrenhal. And as I said, I had to do this in 2 separate recordings, because there's always too much noise here for me to record, but I finally got it done. So sorry it took so long, but here it is, and hopefully I will get the 6th one out to you sometime this week. I hope. Soon. So anyway, stick around, and I just finished the first half of A World of Ice and Fire. So I know a little bit more about the history now, and I can tell you a little bit about that more. So, hopefully you'll stick around and watch it.